Hey guys, tonight we begin with why it sucked to be a medieval army commander. You can't even imagine how hard it was to be an army commander. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You imagine yourself standing at the edge of a great hall, the weight of a crown's command resting on your shoulders. You are not a king, not the supreme sovereign, but you are the one chosen to lead the armies into the mud and blood of war. At first it feels like glory, like honor, until you realize the truth. It's less a privilege and more a trap. Every king, every duke, every princely master has their own ambitions, and you are the one meant to make those dreams real. You cannot say no. When the crown commands, you march. And if you hesitate, you are not just dismissed. You are branded a coward, a traitor, a man unworthy of your family name. Your choice is stripped away the moment you accept the role. The burden of serving royalty is cruel because their wars are rarely yours. A king will call you to fight a border skirmish that could have been avoided with words, yet he demands rivers of blood in payment. Sometimes you're asked to defend a claim so flimsy it hangs on the marriage of a distant cousin or the insult of a rival court. You may see the absurdity, but you cannot voice it. The moment you suggest peace, you are branded disloyal. If you lose a campaign, it is your head the king demands, not his. If you win, it is his glory, not yours, that will echo through the ballads sung in taverns. You are expected to gamble everything, your life, your men, your family's lands, for the sake of a monarch's pride. And yet you cannot step away. You cannot shrug off this duty. Medieval society does not allow escape. You were born into it, molded by your station. A knight may decline a duel, a peasant may hide from a tax collector, but a commander cannot refuse his king. The king owns your sword, your household, your reputation. That means even when you know a campaign is doomed, when supplies are empty and allies scarce, you still must rally your soldiers and stride into the impossible. The failure will always be yours, even when the cause was rotten from the start. The political knots you inherit are thick and tangled. Rival nobles whisper against you in council halls, jealous of your position. They point out every falter, every hesitation, twisting the king's ear against you. Sometimes you know that your greatest battle is not fought in armor on a muddy plain, but in silken chambers lit by candles. You must balance diplomacy with sheer groveling, keeping your monarch convinced that you are his loyal hound, ready to bite when commanded. And yet you are not blind. You know that the same monarch may replace you at any sign of weakness. Loyalty flows only one way, you to him. What makes it worse is the unpredictable nature of medieval politics. Alliances shift like sand in the wind. You may be ordered to fight alongside a duke you despise, a man who once raided your lands, but now he is your ally because the king commands it. Tomorrow the same man may be your enemy. This constant shifting corrodes trust, even among your own lieutenants. You never know who serves you faithfully and who simply waits for your downfall. It is an exhausting paranoia, a burden that gnaws at you even as you ride into battle. And then there is the guilt, though no one calls it that in your age. You know deep down that the people who will suffer most from the crown's decisions are not the nobles who plan them, but the peasants who till the fields. Every time the king insists on conquest, every time he demands that you march, you see the cost in charred villages, stolen grain, and starving families. You are the instrument of this suffering. You cannot refuse the king, but you are the hand that burns, the hand that takes. Your conscience fights with your obedience, but conscience rarely wins. The crown always demands more, and you must obey. When you first dreamed of command, you may have imagined honor, the shining banners, the knights at your side, the songs sung in your praise. What you face instead is obligation. You are chained to the throne, your every decision judged not by its wisdom, but by its convenience to your monarch. If you fall short, you become a scapegoat. If you succeed, you are merely a stepping stone. Either way, the burden of the crown's ambition crushes you, dragging you deeper into wars that were never yours to fight, but always yours to lose. You wake at dawn, Not because you slept peacefully, but because hunger and responsibility weigh too heavily on your chest to allow rest. As a commander, you learn quickly that men fight less for banners and oaths than for bread. No matter how loyal your soldiers claim to be, if their stomachs growl too long, their loyalty crumbles. Feeding an army is the silent war you must fight every single day, and it is often harder than any clash of swords. Imagine it, thousands of men, each needing at least 2 pounds of food a day. Grain, meat, ale, sometimes cheese if fortune smiles. Then there are horses, war horses and pack animals alike, each requiring hay and oats. A marching army is not just a host of warriors, it is a horde of mouths, all devouring supplies at a terrifying rate. You might begin a campaign with full wagons, but after a week the barrels are half empty, and men already begin to grumble. You hear it in the muttering around campfires, in the slower pace of marching feet. Hunger spreads faster than panic, and once it sets in, discipline begins to rot. The countryside cannot sustain you. Armies are parasites upon the land. Every field you pass must be stripped of grain, every barn emptied, every flock of sheep taken. To the villagers, you are less a noble commander and more a thief in armor. They curse your name behind closed doors, even when they bow before your soldiers. Yet what choice do you have? If you do not take, your men starve. If you take too much, the land itself rebels, refusing to feed you the next time you march. The thin balance is almost impossible to keep, and you live in constant dread that your next campaign will collapse not because of an enemy blade, but because your men can no longer chew dry bark and call it food. Rot is another enemy. Grain sours, meat spoils, ale leaks from cracked barrels. Rats scurry through supplies, gnawing through the hope of tomorrow. You can post guards over the wagons, you can punish thieves with lash or rope, but you cannot stop the simple reality of time and weather. Rain soaks sacks of flour until they stink like death. A single storm can wipe out half your provisions. And then what? You must either retreat in shame or risk your army's collapse from within. More than once, commanders have lost entire campaigns, not because the enemy was clever, but because their food was gone. Worse still are the mercenaries. They are not bound by loyalty to king or country, but by coin and the meals you provide. Miss a payment or let them go hungry and they desert. Sometimes they switch sides, marching off to serve your enemy for better rations. You learn to fear the clink of empty purses almost as much as the rattle of enemy swords. Feeding soldiers is a duty, but feeding mercenaries is a contract sealed with bread. Your own knights complain too. Aristocrats are not built for hardship. They expect feasts, not scraps of stale bread. They whine when the meat is too tough or the ale too thin, as though you conjure banquets from thin air. Yet to keep their loyalty, you must endure their complaints lest they decide to ride home and leave you abandoned, with nothing but common foot soldiers. You lie awake many nights, staring at the smoke of the campfires, calculating how long your food will last. You divide it in your mind, slicing each loaf thinner and thinner, as if mathematics could multiply bread. In the morning you must smile, must show confidence, must pretend that supplies are secure. If your men sense the truth, if they know you fear starvation, they will falter, and the entire army could disintegrate before the first enemy spear is lifted. Commanders dream of victory in battle, of breaking enemy lines with bold charges. But victory often begins or dies at the mess pot. If your men eat, they march. If they march, they fight. If they fight, you stand a chance. But if they starve, they will turn their swords not against the enemy, but against you. And so each campaign becomes a race against hunger, a desperate effort to keep the beast of your army fed, knowing all the while that the beast may devour you if you fail. The king may demand glory, and the soldiers may demand food, but in the end it is coin that oils the gears of war. As a commander, you soon discover that funding a campaign is a monster all its own, one that grows hungrier every season. The weight of gold is heavier than the weight of any sword, because without it nothing moves. You cannot hire mercenaries, cannot repair wagons, cannot even buy the grain that keeps the men alive. War bleeds money faster than blood, and every day you spend in the field is another day of drowning in expense. You are told that the crown funds you, that the king's treasury is behind your cause. But those are comforting lies. The truth is that treasuries are often empty, drained by decades of poor harvests, foolish festivals, or the king's own indulgences. When the call to war comes, you are ordered to make do, as though armies march on good intentions. That means begging loans from merchants, promising repayment in spoils that may never come, or squeezing yet more taxes from peasants who already live one winter away from starvation. You do not wield only a sword, you wield debt, and debt is treacherous. The merchants you borrow from are not loyal like soldiers. They care nothing for your cause, your king, or your victory. They care for coin, and if your campaign falters, they will demand repayment regardless. Many commanders have found themselves bankrupt even after surviving the battlefield, ruined not by steel, but by ledgers. A noble family can be destroyed just as effectively by moneylenders as by rival armies, and every loan you sign feels like carving another slice from your future. Then come the mercenaries. Knights and levies might answer a call to arms out of duty, but mercenaries march only for pay. They are the wolves of the battlefield, loyal to nothing but silver. And wolves, when unfed, turn on their masters. You must keep their purses full, their bellies satisfied, and their belief alive that serving under you is worth their loyalty. The problem is, mercenaries are expensive. Sometimes they cost more per month than entire villages can produce in a year. And if your payments falter even once, they may desert, or worse, defect. Imagine the nightmare of watching men you hired yesterday standing across the field tomorrow, their swords now pointed at you, their price met by your enemy. Even your own knights are not cheap. Aristocrats fight because of obligation, yes, but they expect spoils, land, ransom, plunder. If your campaign produces none of these, their resentment festers. They whisper that you mismanaged the war, that your leadership is weak, that another commander would surely lead them to richer rewards. You are not simply leading an army. You are managing expectations, juggling egos, and disguising poverty as strategy. The logistics of money weigh on every decision you make. How many troops can you actually afford to keep in the field? How far can you march before supplies become too expensive to replace? Every choice is measured not in blood, but in coin. You may wish to fight boldly, to strike swiftly into enemy territory, but each mile deeper means more wagons, more hired hands, more guards. Boldness is punished with bankruptcy, and so you hesitate, calculating whether victory is even affordable. Sometimes you are forced into dark choices. You may allow your soldiers to pillage, not because you approve, but because you have no money to pay them otherwise. You let them plunder villages, seize cattle, ransom prisoners, anything to keep their loyalty intact. But with every torch lit, with every barn burned, you also destroy your own reputation. To peasants and townsfolk, you are no better than a bandit in gilded armor. You win battles but lose the people, and their hatred festers long after your banners march away. And then there is the king himself, the source of your orders. He demands victories, but rarely does he loosen his purse to help you achieve them. You are expected to fund campaigns out of your own estate, selling land, pawning jewelry, draining your family's coffers. Generations of wealth can vanish in a single campaign, leaving your heirs to inherit ruins instead of riches. Even when you return victorious, the crown is quick to claim spoils for itself, leaving you hollow-handed. It is a cruel irony. The greater your service, the poorer you often become. This is why so many commanders die not rich but ruined. They leave behind debts, broken estates, bitter heirs. Some take bribes simply to survive, turning into the very corruption they once despised. Others gamble recklessly, betting everything on plunder and conquest, only to end up hanged when fortune deserts them. In the end, the battlefield is not the only place you risk your life. The counting table can kill you just as surely, leaving you strangled in a noose of coin. So you march, always with the rattle of money in your ears, the endless worry that your army will not last another week, another day, another meal without silver. You are a commander, yes, but before that, you are a treasurer, a banker, a desperate gambler trying to keep the game alive. And every step of the way, you feel the cold truth. Armies are not won by courage, but by coin. and coin is the one enemy you can never truly defeat. The first time you march at the head of an army, you believe the stories. You imagine the sight of banners fluttering in the wind, soldiers marching in perfect lines, the sound of drums and horns filling the air like thunder. But the reality sets in quickly. Moving an army is not a triumphal procession. It is misery. It is chaos stretched out for miles along a dirt road. It is mud sucking at boots, wagons breaking on stones, and men collapsing from exhaustion long before an enemy even appears. You cannot grasp the scale of it until you see it firsthand. An army of even 10,000 men stretches for miles. Horses, wagons, smiths, cooks, servants, and camp followers all clog the path. At the front, knights grow impatient, demanding faster progress. At the rear, peasants stumble under loads of equipment. In between, soldiers bicker, fight, and wander off to steal from villages. You ride back and forth all day, your throat raw from shouting, your temper fraying with every delay. The march is less a disciplined advance and more a moving city of disorder. Roads are your first enemy. Medieval Europe does not gift you wide stone highways. Instead, you face narrow, rutted tracks that turn into rivers of mud at the first rain. Wagons sink axle-deep, requiring hours to drag them free. Horses break legs in unseen holes. Bridges collapse under the weight of your supplies, leaving you stranded on one side of a river, while the enemy gathers on the other. And there are never enough engineers, never enough ropes, never enough wood to rebuild what crumbles beneath you. Then there is the weather. The sun beats down mercilessly in summer, baking men inside their armor until they faint. In winter, the cold gnaws at fingers and toes, frostbite claiming soldiers before a single arrow flies. Rain turns camps into swamps, where men wallow ankle-deep in filth. Even the air itself betrays you. In heat, food rots faster. In damp, weapons rust. In cold, fires die. Every season is an enemy, and none can be negotiated with. You also face the problem of speed. Your king may demand you march quickly, to strike before the enemy is ready, but armies move at the pace of their slowest wagons. Days stretch into weeks as you creep along, and by the time you arrive, the advantage is lost. Meanwhile, the enemy, smaller, lighter, unburdened by supply trains, can harry you, strike at your flanks and vanish before you can retaliate. You are the lumbering beast, they the swift wolves, and you are forced to endure their taunts as your army crawls onward. And men are fragile. They fall ill after long days of trudging. They desert when the march drags on too long without glory. Some collapse simply from weariness, their bodies too starved or too weak to keep up. You cannot leave them behind, they slow you down. But carrying them forward drains precious resources. Every man who falters is another strain, another reminder that your strength is leaking away before the real test even begins. Water is its own torment. Streams run dry in summer, forcing you to send men out searching, sometimes for miles, just to fill skins. Rivers may be poisoned or controlled by your enemy. When there is no water, thirst takes hold, and thirsty men grow mutinous. Even if you find water, there is the risk of sickness. Stagnant ponds spread disease faster than any sword stroke. One careless drink, and half a company may be bedridden. And all the while, discipline frays. Soldiers grow restless when there is no battle to fight, no enemy in sight, only endless walking. They brawl, they steal, they slip into villages to terrorize peasants. You try punishments, whippings, hangings, stocks, but fear is not enough to hold order for long. The march breaks men as surely as combat does, grinding down their patience until only resentment remains. The truth is, most campaigns do not fail on the battlefield. They fail on the road. Supplies run out, wagons break, soldiers desert, horses die. By the time you reach your destination, your army is a shadow of what it was when you set out. And even if you somehow keep them intact, your men arrive exhausted, hungry, and bitter, hardly in the state to face a waiting enemy. You realize in those long stretches of mud and dust that war is less about strategy and more about survival. The battle is not at the walls of the enemy's castle. It is here, in the march itself, in the endless struggle to move your men from one point to another without collapsing. Every commander dreams of the clash of steel, but most die crushed beneath the silent weight of distance, terrain, and the endless misery of marching. You brace yourself for combat, but it is not the enemy's arrows or swords that you come to dread most. It is the invisible enemy that lives in your own camp. Disease is the shadow that marches with you, settling into your tents, your wagons, your very breath. You quickly learn that no matter how sharp your strategy or how disciplined your soldiers, a single fever can unravel everything. Plague in the ranks spreads like fire in dry straw, and once it takes hold, even the bravest warriors turn helpless. The conditions of an army camp are perfect breeding grounds for sickness. Men live shoulder to shoulder, sleeping in cramped tents that stink of sweat and smoke. Latrines are shallow pits, dug too close to the food wagons. Water sources are fouled within days, polluted by waste, animals, and corpses. Every surface crawls with lice and fleas, biting into skin, carrying illness from one body to another. You walk through the camp at night and hear the coughing, the groaning, the restless turning of men already caught in the grip of fever, and you know that by the time symptoms show, it is already too late to contain it. Dysentery is one of the cruelest foes. Soldiers stricken with it cannot fight. They cannot even march. Their strength drains out of them as they stumble, pale and weak, unable to lift a spear. Entire units vanish into sickness within days. Then there is typhus, carried by lice sweeping through the ranks like a phantom army. Smallpox leaves men scarred, blinded, or dead. Even minor illnesses, what you would dismiss in peacetime as a cough, a stomachache, become lethal when combined with hunger and exhaustion. And then, of course, there is the plague. Every commander dreads that word because plague does not simply kill men, it dissolves armies. A cough, a rash, a swelling under the arm, and suddenly panic races faster than disease. Soldiers flee, abandoning their posts, scattering into the countryside and spreading the sickness as they go. Villagers shut their doors, refusing you entry. Allies melt away. Your army, once proud and strong, becomes a wandering pestilence feared by all. Even if you manage to march on, your ranks are thinned, your morale shattered, and the stench of death clings to you like a curse. You try remedies, but they are primitive and cruel. Physicians bleed men with knives, hoping to drain illness from their veins. Others burn herbs, filling tents with choking smoke that does nothing but worsen the coughing. Superstition thrives. Soldiers wear charms, pray to relics, or blame witches for their suffering. When no cure works, the camp grows restless, convinced the gods have abandoned them. You are left trying to command not just soldiers, but frightened children grasping for meaning in their misery. The greatest tragedy is that you can do little. You may try to move the camp, but travel spreads the illness further. You may separate the sick, but soldiers resent being abandoned and resist until their last breath. And if you are too harsh, too eager to purge the infected, you risk mutiny. What commander can stand before his men and order the execution of the sick without losing all trust? You are trapped. If you show mercy, disease spreads. If you show cruelty, your authority collapses. Worse, disease does not respect rank. You may find your most trusted knight struck down, your loyal lieutenants bedridden, even your own body beginning to tremble with fever. Command itself becomes fragile. Armies collapse when leaders vanish, and if you fall sick, no amount of gold, no number of victories in your past will save the host from disintegrating. You live in fear not just of arrows, but of a single cough in the wrong place. There is a grim irony in it. You prepare for years to master strategy, to learn the art of war, to wield power with wisdom and precision. Yet in the end, the deciding factor is often a puddle of foul water or a rat slipping into a grain sack. You march into war dreaming of glory, but disease robs you of everything before steel even touches steel. You watch as soldiers who survived sieges, who endured wounds, who braved cavalry charges, waste away helplessly in the mud of your camp. No songs are sung for men who die of fever. No poets remember those who rot in their tents. And yet, those nameless deaths are what ruin most commanders. not great defeats in battle, but the silent devastation of plague, turning victory into ashes before a single banner falls. You can face an enemy in the field. You can look across the lines, measure their numbers, study their banners, and prepare your strategy. But what truly chills you as a commander is the enemy you cannot see, the traitor within your own camp. Betrayal is not a possibility in medieval war, it is an inevitability. And the higher you rise, the more eyes watch you, waiting for the chance to pull you down. Your soldiers are sworn to you, but loyalty in this age is a fragile thing. A man fights bravely when he believes in victory, when he believes in spoils, when he believes he will return home alive. Take those beliefs away. Let a campaign drag on too long, or let hunger creep in, and suddenly whispers spread. A knight you trusted begins questioning your orders. A captain complains about your poor judgment. Before long, men are looking to him instead of you. Today's loyal subordinate is tomorrow's usurper, and you live in constant awareness that you are always one insult, one lost skirmish, one empty grain sack away from losing the confidence of your army. And it is not just soldiers. Nobles are worse. Aristocrats in your ranks bring with them their own ambitions, their own rivalries, their own connections to the crown. Some are there to fight for honor, yes, but many are there to outshine you, to prove to the king that they are the better commander. If you stumble, they are ready to report it in the darkest terms. If you succeed, they find ways to belittle it, whispering that the victory came not from your leadership, but from chance, or from their guidance. Your victories are stolen, your failures magnified. Then there are the spies. You may not even know who pays them, whether it is your enemy across the border or a jealous rival in your own kingdom. They slip into camp disguised as merchants, messengers, even priests. They map your defenses, count your supplies, note your weaknesses. Sometimes it is not strangers, but your own men who serve as eyes for someone else, passing along scraps of information in exchange for promises of gold or land. You tighten security, double your patrols, hang men for suspicion alone, but still the leaks continue. Trust becomes a rare luxury, and suspicion seeps into every relationship. Perhaps the cruelest betrayal comes from above, from the king himself. You march at his order, bleed your men dry for his cause, yet he may abandon you the moment politics shift. If your campaign grows unpopular, if he is threatened by your rising fame, he may quietly withdraw his support. Supplies stop arriving, reinforcements never come. You are left stranded in enemy territory, your army withering while your sovereign pretends he never sent you. And when you return, if you return, he greets you not with thanks but with accusations. You have failed, he declares. You have dishonored the crown. All blame is heaped upon you while he washes his hands clean of responsibility. Even within your household, loyalty is not certain. Servants are bribed, letters are intercepted, rumors spread about your intentions, your character, even your family back home. One whisper of disloyalty to the king, and you are finished. It does not matter if the whisper is false, the mere suspicion is enough. You live with the gnawing dread that every word you speak might be repeated, twisted, weaponized against you. And betrayal is not always deliberate. Sometimes men betray you simply out of fear. A soldier taken prisoner may give up your plans to save his skin. A starving peasant may guide your enemy's scouts just to earn a crust of bread. You cannot entirely blame them, yet their desperation puts daggers into your back all the same. This constant threat corrodes you from within. You grow wary, cold, unable to confide in anyone. You question every smile, every pledge of loyalty. You sleep lightly, your hand always close to your sword, your mind racing with suspicion. Leadership isolates you, but fear of betrayal isolates you even more. You become a prisoner of your own caution, trapped in a world where trust is rarer than victory. In the end, the enemy in front of you is less dangerous than the enemies behind you, beside you, even in your own tent. You can plan for a battle, but you cannot plan for a knife slipped between your ribs while you sleep. That is the curse of command. You are never safe, not even among your own men, not even beneath the banners you serve. If swords and traitors don't break you, the skies themselves will. As a medieval commander, you soon realize that weather is not merely a nuisance, but a relentless enemy, one you can neither outwit nor defeat. You march into campaigns with strategies mapped out in your mind, but a single storm, a sudden frost, or a summer drought can unravel everything you've built. No amount of courage or cunning shields you from the sky's indifference. Rain is the most familiar torment. It falls in sheets that soak soldiers to the bone, turning camps into swamps. Tents sag and collapse under the weight of water. Armor rusts, swords dull, bowstrings slacken. Men shiver in wet clothes, their feet blistering into open sores. Horses flounder in mud, wagons sink, and roads vanish into rivers of muck. A single night of heavy rain can delay you for days, even weeks, and in those delays, hunger grows, morale withers, and the enemy gathers strength. Mud is more than inconvenience, it is sabotage. Armies move slower than snails when the earth turns to mire. You may have planned a swift strike to surprise your enemy, but surprise dies when you are forced to drag wagons 1 mile at a time, each wheel needing 20 men to heave it forward. Soldiers collapse in exhaustion, not from fighting, but from wading knee-deep in filth. Sometimes, you abandon wagons altogether, sacrificing precious supplies just to keep moving. Every inch of mud is another cut into your strength. Winter, however, is the true executioner. Snow blinds you, hides paths, buries roads. Frost grips men's fingers until they cannot hold their swords. Firewood runs out, leaving camps to freeze at night. Soldiers huddle together like animals, teeth chattering, waiting for dawn that brings no relief. Frostbite eats away toes and noses. Horses collapse from cold, their bodies stiff and useless. You lose men not to enemy blades, but to silence and frost, and each frozen corpse reminds you that the season itself is against you. And then comes summer, hot, punishing, merciless. The sun scorches helmets until they burn flesh, cooks men inside their own armor, and dries rivers until thirst stalks every step. Water becomes more valuable than gold, yet every stream risks sickness. Men faint on the march, their faces red and blistered. Horses foam at the mouth, collapsing in dust. Supplies spoil faster in the heat, meat turning to rot before it can be eaten. Disease thrives in this season, swarming camps with flies and pestilence. Wind, too, plays its part in destruction. Arrows meant to fly true are twisted off course. Fires, once a comfort, spread uncontrollably, consuming tents and supplies in a single blaze. Sieges falter because storm winds topple ladders, rip down banners, and scatter siege engines. Even the smallest gust becomes a cruel hand, undoing weeks of effort. And always, there is the unpredictability. Weather cannot be timed, cannot be trusted. You may wake to clear skies, only to watch clouds roll in by midday, flooding rivers, drowning fords, and erasing trails. Plans collapse under forces you cannot predict. Scouts report that a crossing is safe, only for rain to turn it deadly hours later. You realize you are not master of the field. You are a pawn beneath the sky's whims. Superstition only makes it worse. Soldiers see omens in storms, curses in droughts, divine wrath in snowfalls. A sudden thunderclap during battle may cause panic, men convinced God has spoken against them. You must fight not just the elements, but the despair they plant in your army. You tell them it is nothing, that rain is only rain, but their eyes say otherwise. Faith is stronger than reason, and when the skies darken, so does the will of your men. The greatest humiliation is that the weather shows no preference. Kings, peasants, commanders, mercenaries, it strikes all alike. Your power means nothing when the ground itself betrays you. You may outwit human enemies, but the storm laughs at strategy. And so, you march with your head tilted toward the heavens, dreading each shift of wind, each cloud on the horizon. For you know that in this age armies are not destroyed only by steel. They are destroyed by mud, frost, drought, and storm. The sky itself is your most faithful enemy, and it never tires. If the weather is cruel, then disease is its faithful servant, creeping silently through your camps. As a medieval commander, you quickly learn that sickness is more lethal than swords. Steel may cut down 100 men in a battle, but plague can claim 1,000 in a single week. You stand powerless as the invisible enemy eats through your ranks, leaving bodies piled in ditches, morale shattered, and your once mighty army reduced to a shuffling mass of coughing, limping survivors. It begins with filth. Armies are vast cities on the move, yet they have no sewers, no clean streets, no ordered disposal of waste. Men relieve themselves wherever they stand, and pits meant to hold refuse overflow within days. The stench clings to everything: clothes, tents, even the air you breathe. Rats swarm to the feast, gnawing at supplies, spreading fleas and sowing pestilence. Wherever armies march, vermin follow, and wherever vermin go, death is never far behind. Water, the very thing you need to survive, turns traitor. Wells are fouled by the sheer numbers of men and horses. Rivers, once clear, become polluted with waste, animal carcasses, and the sick themselves. Soldiers drink because they must, but each swallow carries the risk of dysentery or worse. Soon the groans of men clutching their bellies echo louder than war drums. You see them stagger out of formation, collapsing in filth, their bodies racked with spasms. No sword can defend against water that kills. And then there are the fevers. Camps turn into hospitals without walls, where men burn with heat, their bodies shaking uncontrollably. Some sweat until they collapse, others grow pale and thin, coughing up blood. The Black Death is the name whispered in every corner of Europe, and though not every sickness is that plague, the shadow of it looms over every campaign. The sight of one bubo, one dark swelling on a soldier's neck, can send terror through an entire camp. Soldiers desert, fearing contagion more than enemy steel. Wounds, too, are gateways to death. A sword cut is rarely clean. It festers in the mud and dirt of the battlefield. Infection creeps in unseen, turning a simple gash into a death sentence. Limbs swell, turn black, and stink of rot. Amputation is the only chance. But surgeons are crude, their blades unclean, their methods brutal. You hear your men screaming as their arms or legs are hacked away without anesthetic, and you know that half of them will die anyway, fever burning through what flesh remains. Lice infest every garment. No matter how often your men scratch, the itching never ceases. These tiny parasites carry typhus, spreading like wildfire through crowded tents. A single louse can spark an epidemic, and by the time you notice the fevers, it is too late. Men collapse mid-march, unable to rise. Entire companies vanish not from enemy blades, but from swarms no larger than a grain of sand. As commander, you bear the burden of watching this unfold with no cure. You try to enforce cleanliness, but how do you keep an army clean when rivers run foul, when soap is scarce, when rations barely cover hunger? You call priests to bless the camp, but their prayers do little to halt pestilence. You appoint healers, but they bleed men, chant charms, and prescribe herbs that rarely help. You realize you cannot command disease the way you command men. It ignores your rank, laughs at your authority, and spreads where it wills. Worst of all is the hopelessness it sows. Soldiers will face an enemy, even against impossible odds, because they see him before them. But how do you fight a sickness you cannot see? How do you rally men when each cough in the night reminds them of death creeping closer? Some abandon faith altogether, others become fanatics, convinced the sickness is punishment for sins. The camp splits between despair and hysteria, and you are left trying to hold them together with words that even you no longer believe. And so each night, as you lie awake listening to the hacking coughs, the moans of the dying, and the cries of widowed camp followers, you come to understand the cruelest truth. You were never meant to command just an army. You were meant to command a moving graveyard. Every march carries the stink of disease. Every pause threatens an outbreak. The longer a campaign drags, the more certain it becomes that your greatest battle is not against men at all, but against the unseen executioner that walks silently beside you. If disease gnaws at your strength from within, then hunger hollows you from the belly outward. As a medieval commander, you learn quickly that war is not fought only with swords and spears. It is fought with bread, and bread is harder to secure than any fortress. You may have thousands of men under your banner, but without food, they are little more than ghosts in armor, stumbling shells with no strength to fight, no will to march, and no loyalty to you. Feeding an army is a nightmare of numbers, A single soldier eats more than 2 pounds of bread a day, and if you march with 10,000 men, the numbers swell beyond comprehension. Add to that horses. Those ravenous beasts devour oats, hay, and grass in endless quantities. Every mile you travel consumes mountains of grain, herds of cattle, rivers of ale, and yet you cannot carry it all. Wagons break down, oxen die, and roads are too narrow to bear endless carts of supplies. The more you bring, the slower you move. The faster you move, the less you can carry. Either way, hunger waits just ahead. At first, you rely on what you brought with you: salted meat, hard bread, dried peas. These are hard to chew, harder still to stomach, but they keep bellies from aching. Yet they vanish quickly, consumed in desperate gulps after long marches. And once they are gone, your army turns outward, toward the land you march across. Villages are stripped bare, fields trampled, orchards raided. Farmers wail as their stores vanish, livestock driven off by men too hungry to care. Your army becomes a swarm of locusts, leaving behind only emptiness and ash. But the land is not endless. Once villages are emptied, there is nothing left to take. Your soldiers wander further, risking ambush, fighting peasants who defend their homes with pitchforks. Supplies thin to nothing, and desperation sets in. Men eat grass, roots, bark. They boil leather, gnawing on belts and saddles to trick their stomachs into silence. Some whisper of worse, stories of men who, in the darkest moments, turned on the weak, consuming what no man should consume. You never ask, but you know hunger drives even the proudest soldier to madness. Hunger breeds disobedience faster than any enemy. Men grumble in ranks, muttering that you have failed them. Officers cannot keep order among starving soldiers, who begin to desert, slipping away at night in search of food. Loyalty fades when the belly is empty. You see it in their eyes. They would sooner kill for bread than die for you. Discipline, so carefully built, collapses with every skipped meal. An army without food is not an army, it is a mob with weapons. If disease gnaws at your strength from within, then hunger hollows you from the belly outward. As a medieval commander, you learn quickly that war is not fought only with swords and spears, it is fought with bread. And bread is harder to secure than any fortress. You may have thousands of men under your banner, but without food they are little more than ghosts in armor, stumbling shells with no strength to fight, no will to march, and no loyalty to you. Feeding an army is a nightmare of numbers. A single soldier eats more than 2 pounds of bread a day, and if you march with 10,000 men, the numbers swell beyond comprehension. Add to that horses. Those ravenous beasts devour oats, hay, and grass in endless quantities. Every mile you travel consumes mountains of grain, herds of cattle, rivers of ale, and yet you cannot carry it all. Wagons break down, oxen die, and roads are too narrow to bear endless carts of supplies. The more you bring, the slower you move. The faster you move, the less you can carry. Either way, hunger waits just ahead. At first, you rely on what you brought with you: salted meat, hard bread, dried peas. These are hard to chew, harder still to stomach, but they keep bellies from aching. Yet they vanish quickly, consumed in desperate gulps after long marches. And once they are gone, your army turns outward, toward the land you march across. Villages are stripped bare, fields trampled, orchards raided. Farmers wail as their stores vanish, livestock driven off by men too hungry to care. Your army becomes a swarm of locusts, leaving behind only emptiness and ash. But the land is not endless. Once villages are emptied, there is nothing left to take. Your soldiers wander further, risking ambush, fighting peasants who defend their homes with pitchforks. Supplies thin to nothing, and desperation sets in. Men eat grass, roots, bark. They boil leather, gnawing on belts and saddles to trick their stomachs into silence. Some whisper of worse, stories of men who, in the darkest moments, turned on the weak, consuming what no man should consume. You never ask, but you know hunger drives even the proudest soldier to madness. Hunger breeds disobedience faster than any enemy. Men grumble in ranks, muttering that you have failed them. Officers cannot keep order among starving soldiers, who begin to desert, slipping away at night in search of food. Loyalty fades when the belly is empty. You see it in their eyes. They would sooner kill for bread than die for you. Discipline, so carefully built, collapses with every skipped meal. An army without food is not an army. It is a mob with weapons. If hunger hollows your men from the inside, then morale collapses them from the heart. As a medieval commander, you quickly discover that battles are not only fought with steel, but with spirit. An army is made of human beings, fearful, superstitious, and easily swayed, and their loyalty is as fragile as glass. Once broken, it cannot be mended, and without loyalty, you are not a commander at all, merely a man standing in front of a mob with weapons. At the start, there is pride. When banners rise and drums beat, when the church blesses the campaign and villagers cheer you on, spirits soar. Your soldiers believe themselves to be chosen, marching with God's favor, destined for glory. They laugh as they march, singing songs of home, boasting of victories yet to come. But war is long, and that pride withers quickly beneath the weight of hunger, sickness, and endless marching. For every day without food, for every comrade buried in the mud, for every night spent cold and sleepless, a soldier's faith in you diminishes. Fear is your greatest enemy. Men fear the dark when whispers of ambush ripple through the camp. They fear the enemy when rumors of their strength spread. They fear the plague when a single man coughs blood into the fire. Fear spreads faster than any order you can give, poisoning minds, turning brave men into deserters. You can punish one coward, but you cannot punish fear itself. It breeds quietly in every tent until even your most loyal knight begins to doubt. Superstition feeds this fear. Medieval soldiers see omens in everything: the flight of crows, the crack of thunder, a sudden eclipse. A rainstorm may be read as God's wrath, a comet as doom for your army. Priests whisper warnings, prophets emerge among the men, and suddenly your campaign is no longer a matter of strategy, but of fate. You may tell them the enemy bleeds like any man, but how do you argue with the belief that the heavens themselves are against you? And then there is pay, or rather, the lack of it. Soldiers are not driven only by loyalty. They are driven by coin. Promises of gold are easily made before a campaign, but harder to deliver once coffers run dry. Weeks turn into months, and men begin to mutter that they have marched, fought, and bled for nothing. They compare their suffering with the wealth they imagine you hoard, and resentment festers. Mutiny brews in the grumbling around campfires, in the narrowed eyes that glance your way. It takes only one spark, a delayed payment, a missed ration, for revolt to ignite. Discipline falters with morale. At first, men march in neat lines, proud beneath your banner, but as spirits weaken, order unravels. Soldiers straggle behind, abandon their posts, steal from each other. Drunkenness spreads, gambling rises, fights break out. Officers lash men to posts, flogging them bloody in attempts to restore order, but punishment only deepens bitterness. The more you tighten your grip, the more your army slips through your fingers. Even victory cannot always mend morale. When a battle is won but casualties are high, men grieve more than they celebrate. They look at the piles of dead and wonder what the cost was for. They do not see triumph, they see loss. And when battles are lost, morale plummets into a pit so deep you cannot climb out. Men whisper that God has abandoned you, that fate is against you, that survival lies only in desertion. You can rally a beaten army once, maybe twice, but too many defeats break even the bravest hearts. And always you feel the weight of their eyes. Every decision you make, every hardship they suffer, every death that touches them, your men place it all on you. To them, you are not only their leader, but their fate. If they starve, it is your fault. If they freeze, it is your fault. If they lose, it is your fault. Their morale is tied to your shadow, and any crack in your composure becomes a crack in their spirit. You must smile when you want to weep, stand tall when you want to collapse, and shout confidence when doubt eats at your soul. For the moment they sense your fear, they are lost. The cruelest truth is this: morale is more fragile than flesh. Flesh can be mended with stitches, bones can heal with time, but once the spirit of an army breaks, it is gone forever. You may gather bodies, but you will never again gather hearts. And so every day you fight not only the enemy, not only the hunger, not only the disease, you fight despair itself. Each night as you lie awake, you wonder if your men will still march with you tomorrow, or will you wake to find your camp empty, your banner abandoned, your title meaningless. You are not just commander of men, you are commander of their hope. And hope, in the medieval world, is the rarest and most fragile weapon of all. If morale is fragile, then the very fabric of loyalty among nobles is even more treacherous. As a medieval commander, you quickly realize you are not only leading common soldiers, you are herding lions, each with its own pride, ambitions, and claws. Every knight and baron under your banner marches with his own agenda, his own followers and his own grudges. They may call you commander, but in truth, they serve themselves first, and you last. At the heart of it is feudal obligation. These men do not fight for you out of devotion, but because a contract binds them. 50 days of service, a handful of soldiers, sometimes even less. Once their obligation ends, so does their loyalty. You may be in the middle of a siege, your victory nearly in sight, yet half your noble retinue may ride home because their duty has expired. They will leave you stranded, not out of cowardice, but because they believe you owe them nothing more. You can beg, threaten, or bribe, but obligation weighs heavier than loyalty. Even when nobles stay, they undermine you in subtler ways. Each one believes himself your equal, sometimes even your better. They resent taking orders from another noble, and every command you give stings their pride. You tell them to guard the left flank, but they believe the glory lies on the right. You ask them to endure hunger, but they demand extra rations for their men. You tell them to wait, but they charge ahead for fame, ruining your strategy. You are forced to balance their egos as carefully as you balance your battle lines, for a single slight can drive them to sabotage. Worse still, their loyalty is not truly yours, it is to their own banners. The men they bring obey them, not you. When you shout orders on the field, those soldiers glance not at your banner but at their lord's, waiting for his nod. If he defies you, they follow him, and your carefully laid plans unravel into chaos. Your army is not one army at all. It is a patchwork of private forces stitched together with fragile threads of obligation. Jealousy and rivalry fester constantly. Nobles bicker over who marches first, who holds the best ground, who receives the lion's share of plunder. They measure their worth not in victory, but in spoils and titles. When one knight is praised, another sulks, whispering that favoritism guides your hand. Alliances shift daily. Today they stand beside each other. Tomorrow they plot behind closed tents. As commander, you are less a general than a mediator in an endless feud of noble pride. Hand-lurking always is betrayal. Nobles change sides as easily as they change armor. A single promise of land from the enemy, a single marriage alliance offered, and a man who fought at your side yesterday may fight against you tomorrow. You learn to trust no one completely, for even the most loyal-seeming knight may already be negotiating his surrender in secret. And when one noble betrays you, his men follow, swelling the enemy's ranks with faces you once counted as allies. Even in victory, they are a burden. After battle, nobles squabble over prisoners, loot, and credit. You may want to reward common soldiers for their bravery, but nobles snatch every prize for themselves. They measure victory not by the land you gain, but by the riches they collect. Their greed sours triumph into resentment, and you find yourself once again in the role of negotiator, trying to keep their feuds from breaking into open bloodshed. And yet, you cannot simply cast them aside. They are your strength, your cavalry, your ironclad elite. Without them, your army is nothing but peasants with pitchforks. You must flatter, bribe, and indulge them, even when their arrogance undermines you. You must swallow your pride, for theirs is boundless. You are their commander in name, but in truth you are their hostage, forever balancing their demands against the survival of your campaign. The cruelest irony is that you may be remembered as their commander, yet history will not record the endless nights you spent managing their rivalries, soothing their egos, and preventing their betrayals. Chroniclers will write of battles and banners, not of the poison of noble politics that hollowed your command from within. And so you march forward, never certain if the man at your side will remain there when the swords begin to clash. Each day, you fear the same question, not whether the enemy will break you, but whether your own nobles will. For in truth, your army's greatest danger is not across the battlefield. It is sitting at your own table, smiling, plotting, waiting. If nobles drain your patience with politics, mercenaries drain your coffers with greed. As a medieval commander, you may think that hiring professional fighters will strengthen your army, but soon you discover they are as dangerous as any foe. They march beneath your banner not out of loyalty, not out of faith, but for coin alone. And coin, like food, runs out faster than you can replace it. When it does, mercenaries become a plague inside your camp, devouring discipline, sowing violence, and sometimes turning their swords against you. At first, they seem like a blessing. Mercenaries arrive well-armed, well-trained, and ready to fight, sparing you the burden of training peasants or relying too heavily on quarrelsome nobles. They form your vanguard in sieges, they guard your baggage trains, they fight with skill and ferocity in battles where farmers would falter. You think them dependable, you think them professional. But then the first payments come due. They demand coin regularly and in amounts that drain your treasury. Gold and silver flow out of your coffers like water through a cracked barrel. Miss a payment, even by a single day, and their tone shifts. Grumbling fills their ranks, discipline falters, and their captains remind you, loudly, that their contracts bind them only to the weight of your purse. Unlike nobles bound by honor or peasants bound by duty, mercenaries hold no illusion of loyalty. To them, you are nothing more than a paymaster, and they will serve whichever paymaster pays most. When money fails, mercenaries take what they want. They pillage villages without orders, rob your own soldiers, extort civilians under your protection. They bring violence wherever they camp, leaving behind burned fields, violated peasants, and broken promises. Each act of brutality erodes the very cause you fight for, turning allies into enemies and staining your reputation. You may order them to stop, but they laugh behind your back, for they know that without them, your army crumbles. Worse still, mercenaries often hold your campaign hostage. They choose moments of crisis during sieges, on the eve of battle, or in the middle of a long march, to demand more money. They refuse to fight until their purses are filled. You may plead, threaten, even beg, but unless you find coin, they remain idle, leaving you exposed. More than once, commanders have watched their campaigns collapse simply because the gold ran dry at the wrong moment. And betrayal is always a shadow at your shoulder. Mercenaries switch sides with terrifying ease. A rival king offers them more gold, and suddenly the men you paid for are now arrayed against you. Some do not even wait for their contracts to end. They simply melt away in the night, leaving you with empty tents where once stood your strongest fighters. Their loyalty is measured in coins, and your enemy's purse is often deeper than yours. Even when mercenaries remain, their presence poisons the rest of your army. Common soldiers despise them, seeing them as privileged parasites who eat better, sleep better, and demand more pay. Nobles loathe them, sneering that they fight for coin rather than honor. Quarrels erupt constantly, and blood is shed not against the enemy but between your own men. You, the commander, must spend more time policing your army than preparing for battle, and yet you cannot do without them. They are too skilled, too vital. You grit your teeth, sell land, melt down silver, pawn your future for their service. Each bag of coins you hand over feels like a noose tightening around your neck. And still, you know the moment the gold is gone, their loyalty will vanish with it. The cruelest truth is that mercenaries are not soldiers at all. They are predators. They are wolves, and you are forced to feed them constantly lest they turn on you. In your darkest moments, you wonder if they are worse than the enemy, for the enemy at least declares himself openly. The mercenary smiles, fights for you, and then robs you blind while his blade is still wet with your enemy's blood. So you march forward, coins dwindling, ever fearful of the moment when your hired swords will decide you are no longer worth the weight of their loyalty. And in that moment, you will discover the harshest lesson of command. The deadliest blades are not always across the battlefield. They are the ones you paid to wield on your behalf. If mercenaries drain your purse, sieges drain your soul. As a medieval commander, you soon learn that open battles are rare. Most wars are wars of walls, stone fortresses perched on hills, castles guarding river crossings, fortified towns bristling with towers. To conquer them, you must endure sieges, and sieges are long, slow, and merciless. They are not moments of swift glory, but months of hunger, disease, and waiting. For you, the commander, a siege is not a test of strength. It is a test of endurance, patience, and cruelty. The first problem is time. Castles are designed to resist, and defenders need only hold until relief arrives. You, however, must wait, watching the days stretch into weeks, weeks into months. Each sunrise brings no progress, only more misery for your men. Boredom gnaws at them as fiercely as hunger. Morale sinks, discipline unravels. A siege is less about bravery and more about which side can suffer longer without breaking. Then comes the problem of supply. While the defenders sit behind thick walls with their stores of grain and salted meat, your army must feed itself in open fields. Every day of waiting devours your resources. Soon, hunger strikes not only your men but your horses. You begin the siege with an army strong and eager, but by the third month, your forces resemble beggars, gaunt and sickly, while the defenders still mock you from the ramparts. The enemy's walls are cruel teachers. Every approach is a death trap. If you try to storm the gates, boiling oil and falling stones greet your men. If you scale ladders, archers pick them off one by one. If you dig tunnels to collapse the walls, defenders counter-dig, flooding your work or collapsing the tunnels on your miners. You build siege engines, towers, rams, trebuchets, but each takes time, wood, and labor, and all can be burned in an instant by a flaming arrow. You spend months building what can be destroyed in minutes. Disease thrives during sieges. Your army camps too close together, sanitation falters, and pestilence spreads. Dysentery, typhus, fever, each runs rampant. Every day you lose soldiers not to enemy arrows, but to sickness. The dead pile up around camp, and their stench seeps into the air. Sometimes you hurl their corpses over the walls, hoping to spread plague among the defenders, but often the pestilence destroys you faster than it weakens them. The cruelty of waiting sharpens into desperation. Soldiers gamble with their lives, sneaking close to walls at night, trying to dig or burn unseen. Most do not return, others desert, slipping away under the cover of darkness. You order executions to restore order, but even fear loses power over men who see no end to their suffering. Soon you are not fighting the defenders. You are fighting your own men, their despair, their mutinies. Sieges are cruel to civilians as well. Inside the walls, the townsfolk starve, eating dogs, rats, even leather. Some try to flee, but you must drive them back, knowing that if you allow them to pass, you weaken your stranglehold on the fortress. You watch starving peasants claw at your camp's edges, begging for mercy, and you harden your heart. For each mercy shown prolongs the siege, and your army cannot afford it. Command requires not only strategy, but coldness. Every act of kindness risks defeat, and always you fear relief. Another army may march to break the siege, and when it arrives, your weary, starving force must fight a fresh opponent. More than one commander has seen victory turn to rout when reinforcements crushed their tired besiegers. You live each day knowing that while you grind yourself against walls, the real enemy may be gathering strength beyond the horizon. In the end, even victory in a siege feels hollow. You may finally breach the walls, but what you find inside is ruin. Gaunt defenders, starving civilians, charred buildings. Your men sack the city, slaughtering and looting, but the prize you win is ash. And if you lose, you waste months of effort, bleed your army dry, and leave with nothing but humiliation. The truth you learn is bitter. Battles may bring glory, but sieges bring only rot. They drag men into the mud, strip them of hope, and demand cruelty from you at every turn. As commander, you discover that the greatest walls are not of stone, but of time, hunger, and despair. And those walls are almost impossible to break. If sieges grind you down, logistics quietly strangle you. As a medieval commander, you quickly discover that victory is not won on the battlefield, it is won on the road. Armies eat, drink, and trample the land into exhaustion, and your ability to keep them fed often matters more than your ability to win fights. Strategy may fill chronicles, but in truth, you spend more hours worrying about bread and fodder than about swords and arrows. The scale of hunger is staggering. Each soldier consumes about 2 pounds of food a day. Multiply that by thousands, and your army devours entire villages within a week. Add to that the horses, each one needing 10 to 15 pounds of grain daily, and you understand why war always leaves famine in its wake. Every march is a moving disaster for peasants who watch their barns emptied, their fields stripped, their animals driven off by your men. You do not march an army through the land. You unleash a plague of locusts that wears boots. But your men do not feast well. Supplies rot quickly, grain spoils, salted meat turns rancid, and beer sours. You cannot carry enough for long campaigns, so you must live off the land, seizing food from peasants or arranging for slow-moving wagon trains. Each solution brings danger. If you strip the countryside, you create hatred, and peasants may rise up, burning your supply lines. If you depend on wagons, they become fat, lumbering targets for raiders. A single ambush can starve your entire army. Roads, too, betray you. Medieval roads are mud in spring, dust in summer, frozen ruts in winter. Carts break, oxen collapse, rivers flood. Your carefully planned supplies vanish in a quagmire, and you watch your soldiers grow thin and restless. Marching through mountains or forests slows you further, leaving your men tired before they even face an enemy. Logistics is a battle you fight every single day, and it rarely feels like you are winning. And then there is water. Men must drink gallons daily, and so must horses. A dry stretch of land can cripple your army before an enemy's sword is even drawn. Wells run dry, rivers shrink, and stagnant water breeds disease. Thirst is a crueler enemy than steel. It kills silently without glory, leaving your men too weak to even stand. Commanders must balance theft and discipline. If you let soldiers raid freely, they gorge themselves today but leave nothing for tomorrow. If you restrict them, they grumble, starve, and mutiny. You walk a knife's edge, issuing orders you know will be broken. Every choice costs you, either in morale or in supplies, or in the goodwill of the land you march through. Foraging forces your army to scatter. Small groups fan out to seize food, but scattered men are easy prey. Bandits, enemy scouts, and peasants with pitchforks can overwhelm them. Soon you hear reports of missing men, ambushed wagons, burned stores. The countryside turns hostile, and your soldiers march in fear, knowing that death may lurk in the hedgerows. Logistics is not just about hunger, it is about vulnerability. Even when you secure supplies, distribution breaks down. Greedy captains hoard food for their favorites, while common soldiers starve. Grain is stolen, wine casks vanish, meat is sold at absurd prices. Corruption spreads through the camp like fire. You give orders, but every hand between your word and a soldier's bowl takes its share. Men curse you for their hunger, though you yourself go hungry as well. And hunger makes men savage. You see it in their eyes as discipline crumbles, in the way they glance at civilians or even at each other. Armies have been known to eat dogs, rats, even leather when food runs out. In the blackest moments, rumors whisper of cannibalism. Hunger is not just physical, it eats away at loyalty, at faith, at sanity. No oath holds when a man's stomach gnaws him to madness. Wars are not decided only by courage or skill, they are decided by bread. The mightiest army crumbles into dust if it cannot eat, while even a ragged band can endure if well fed. As commander, you realize this bitter truth. Your genius in battle means little if your wagons run dry. Victory and defeat hinge on the simplest thing of all, the ability to put food into a man's hand. And so, day after day, you calculate rations, plot routes, scavenge fields, and beg allies for grain. You become less a warrior than a quartermaster, less a general than a grocer with an army. It is not glorious, but it is inescapable. You may dream of banners and charges, but in reality, you fight a constant grinding war against hunger. And hunger always lurks, patient and merciless, ready to destroy you long before an enemy's sword is drawn. If hunger weakens your army, betrayal finishes it. As a medieval commander, you soon learn that your enemies are not only across the battlefield, they sit in your own camp, whisper in your council tent, and lurk among the allies who smile to your face. Politics seeps into every war, poisoning trust, and you must guard yourself not only against arrows, but against daggers aimed at your back. Allies, for instance, are fickle. Kings and lords pledge their banners, but their loyalty is shallow. Many arrive late, bringing too few men, or abandon you mid-campaign when their interests shift. Each noble who rides under your banner fights not for you, but for himself. For loot, for prestige, for land. If fortune turns against you, they vanish like mist, leaving your army hollow. What you thought was unity is merely convenience, and convenience rarely survives hardship. Even within your camp, betrayal brews. Ambitious captains whisper that they could lead better, that your failures are proof of weakness. Some spread rumors to stir dissent, others withhold supplies or delay orders. Mutiny simmers quietly, like a fire under ash, waiting only for despair to fan it into flames. As commander, you live with the knowledge that men you dine with today may rise against you tomorrow. Spies infest your ranks. Peasants who sell food might also sell your plans. Captured prisoners escape with tales of your movements. Even your scribes or priests may secretly carry word to the enemy. You never know who listens, who waits to betray your trust. Paranoia becomes second nature. Every council meeting is shadowed by suspicion, every nod of agreement weighed for treachery. And then there are kings. They give you orders, but their whims destroy campaigns. A king far from the battlefield demands impossible marches, foolish assaults, or senseless retreats. You obey because disobedience means ruin, but each command drags your men closer to disaster. When victory comes, the king takes credit. When defeat comes, blame falls squarely on you. You are the scapegoat, the expendable piece in the grand game of politics. Mercenaries too are dangerous allies. They fight for gold, not loyalty, and gold runs out quickly. When you cannot pay, they desert, switch sides, or even turn on you. More than one commander has seen his hired swords vanish in the night, or worse, join the enemy by morning. Trusting them is like trusting fire, useful, but always threatening to burn you. Even your own men betray you in small ways. They disobey orders, abandon posts, or plunder against your will. Discipline erodes under hunger and fear, and every man looks first to his own survival. Betrayal is not always a dagger. It is sometimes a soldier slipping away when you need him most. And those small betrayals add up, bleeding your strength drop by drop. The cruelest betrayal, however, comes from the system itself. Feudal levies owe you service for only a limited time, 40 days, perhaps 60. Once that duty ends, they pack up and leave, no matter the state of the war. You may stand at the gates of an enemy fortress ready to strike, only to watch half your army march home, their oaths fulfilled, their loyalty ended. You cannot stop them. Your power dissolves in your hands, not through defeat, but through obligation's end. And always treachery lurks beyond the walls. Towns you besiege may bribe your captains to turn aside. Nobles inside fortresses may open gates at night in exchange for lands or promises. Your own side does the same. Gold is cheaper than blood, and many wars end not through valor, but through betrayal. You spend as much time watching for sudden defections as you do planning battles. In the end, you realize that no wall of steel protects you. Trust itself is fragile, and every alliance, every oath, every pledge can crack. Command is not only about leading armies, it is about surviving treachery, about keeping one step ahead of betrayal. You live in constant tension, a blade poised above your back, never knowing when it will fall. It is not the enemy's strength that breaks commanders most often. It is the rot within their own ranks. You learn this truth too late, when loyalty crumbles and daggers gleam in the dark. And when you fall, history rarely blames betrayal. Instead, it calls you incompetent, foolish, unlucky. No one remembers the poison in your cup, the ally who abandoned you, the soldier who opened the gate. They only remember that you failed. That is the bitterest lesson of all. In medieval war, you fear not only defeat, but treachery. And treachery, unlike battle, cannot be fought. It can only be endured until it destroys you.